Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production channel here at YouTube, and welcome to, of course, the Wednesday review. Today, of course, I am reviewing the fourth and in many ways also the newest full-length album from UK thrash metal band Virus. The album is titled Evilution Apocalypse, and it was released through the revived Combat Records on August 14th. And yes, Combat Records was revived. It was revived, of course, by David Ellefson, and of course is under the NMP banner. So, for all of those who may not be familiar with Virus, if you were, then you probably would have also been familiar with Combat Records in the 1980s, since, of course, Combat Records did distribute their second full-length album, Force Recon, in the US, and at least also, I believe, in Canada as well. So there you go again. For also Virus, formed in 1986, and their very first full-length album was titled Pray for War, and that was released in 1987. And of course, in 1989, they had released Lunacy, and then that was kind of it until 2009. They then released their very first thing in years, and it was titled Raped by Mutants, and it was an EP. And then in 2013, they released another EP titled A New Strain of an Old Disease. And now, here we are with Evilution Apocalypse, and at this point, it's just Coke McFinlay as the only sole original member. Most of the guys in the band are at least new members, so I guess that's about it. So let's just get into, of course, Evilution Apocalypse from Virus. Alright. So before I really get into, of course, my thoughts on the album, let me definitely go through, run down the track listing on this album. So there's at least about 10 songs here, and it definitely clocks in at 55 minutes and 15 seconds. Though according to Metal Archives, there's at least 9 songs. However, that really isn't completely true if you were to go on at least Discogs, though they seem to list a digital copy, so I don't know which copy seems to have what. Apparently the CD has 9 and the digital has 10, which is weird and strange. But anyways, I'm just going off at least the 10 track copies, so there's at least 10 tracks on this album, and I'll let you know what is at least the exclusive track on here. So these 10 songs are, of course, Evilution Apocalypse, The Hand That Feeds You, Basement Conversion, Goat, Father, Scum, and Unhuman, Multiple Wargasms, Thrashville, Defective Detective, The Ballad of Inspector Gadget, MBG, and of course, Force Recon and Release the Dead, and both those two are re-recordings, and I will get my thoughts on those two re-recordings later in the review here. So there you go. There's at least 10 songs there. Now, as my thoughts on the album, well, this is definitely a fine thrash metal album from Virus. Compared to of course, the previous release, which was a New Strain of an Old Disease. I think I definitely prefer this right here. I think that this sounds a little more tighter. Even though the production and the mixing is definitely pretty raw. Surprisingly, though, it definitely does kind of, though, it's definitely what more harkens back to at least Force Recon in terms of the production, because again, that album wasn't the most perfectly recorded album, and here they probably do the best to kind of, I would say, they try and go back to that, to kind of give the album, again, that sort of raw feel, and it definitely, I mean, it's still, by today's standards, it is very raw, but compared to at least Force Recon or Pray for War, it's definitely more refined and definitely more fine-tuned, a little cleaner, definitely. But it's still, but by today's standards, it's definitely still a pretty raw-sounding album, and it does give the album more of an edge to it. It definitely does kind of liven up more of the feel, giving it then that just raw oral assault that you definitely would expect from this kind of brand of thrash metal, especially if you're familiar with the stuff from Virus back in the 80s. So definitely, I think this is definitely, for the most part, a solid album. But as far as songs are concerned, let's definitely get into that. As far as the ones that I picked out that really stood out to me the most, The opening title track, it begins with, of course, ominous, haunting intro before finally busting into some crunchy, breakneck speed thrash that will make anybody mosh in their own home. So definitely, that's the best way I can sum up the track. It's a perfect way of opening up the album, and for sure, definitely will just ensue in straight up headbanging. That are just, again, fists in the air and just bopping around the home. That's the best way to sum it up, and it, I think, in many ways, does definitely sum up the rest of the album and gives you the idea of what you're going to expect from this album. It's definitely a good opener. The Hand That Feeds You, it's another crusher for sure on this album. Definitely, again, it just keeps the pace going. It just keeps it going. Great track. Basement Conversion, closest thing to the kind of thrash that you'll find on Virus's classic LP, Force Recon. Though more tighter and better played, it still retains that chaotic, crushing rhythm of said record. Definitely, again, one of the finer tracks on the album for sure as well. I really dig that. Again, it just keeps the pace going. Just keeps the whole car running. Again, this is probably, again, the type of album you really shouldn't be playing on the road, because you're probably you're gonna be urging yourself from not trying to put the pedal to the metal, basically. You're not going to try and put on the gas pedal. You're going to keep yourself from not trying to kill somebody. This is definitely that kind of record. So it's definitely, again, a track like Basement Conversion for sure definitely keeps the pace going for sure. Another standout track to me on the album is Goat, Father Scum and Unhuman. This is another crusher from the creepy church organ type intro, then breaks into, of course, a breakneck speed riffs. This is one brutal assault of a track. Definitely a great song for sure. So I think that those are pretty much the more standout songs, but I do have to also talk about Defective Detective, the Ballad of Inspector Gadget. Though it is definitely not my favorite track on the album, it does bring back that humor they had when they covered the Munsters show theme track on Force Recon. Though it is fun to hear them at least thrash up the Inspector Gadget theme song. Yeah, it's pretty goofy, but again, that's the kind of stuff I expect from Virus, and especially other UK thrash metal bands to begin with. So they definitely seem to, at least in some ways, keep up the humor and stuff instead of just being so doom and gloom and and all the apocalypse and shit. It definitely, in some ways, it lightens up the mood for the album. But definitely, definitely not a bad track on the album. Now, as I mentioned, there are two re-recordings on the album that, of course, are the classic tracks Force Recon and Release the Dead. They are just fine re-recordings. That's what they are. There really isn't much really else to say there. So again, I can just leave things right there. I can just leave things. Again, they're just fine re-recordings. That's all. Nothing really different, though. It just played with the newer lineup than with the original lineup. But again, they do a fine job on definitely keeping the spirit of at least the old songs. But again, just with the modern production, though still pretty raw by modern production standards, like I've stated throughout this review. So again, they're just fine songs in general. So there you go. There is Evilution Apocalypse from Virus. As far as my rating for the album, it's a 8.55 out of 10. I think, again, it's a solid album from Virus. I would say this is probably the best since 1990s Lunacy, in my opinion. Or at times, maybe since Force Recon, even though that is my favorite Virus record, and it's probably the one I own, that at least I own or at least I did own 2 copies of. I'm not going to get into that. Still, though, this is definitely a solid album. I think in many ways, I would say I would put at least next to Force Recon or Lunacy, and I think Lunacy doesn't get at least enough appreciation. I think that was a fine album from Virus to begin with, and I think that they did a pretty fine job with that album. So definitely, I do like this better than A New Strain of an Old Disease. I like this a lot better than that EP. This right here is definitely, again, it's more classic. It's back to basics. It's just a straight up more refined, more energetic. They definitely seem to have enjoyed themselves while recording this album. So you definitely feel that energy, and I think it would definitely lifts up a lot of the songs on the album. So definitely, it's definitely one of their finest albums, and it definitely, I would say in a long time, even though I somewhat dug the Wraith My Mutants EP in general. So, since this album has been out since August 14th, if you have at least heard this album, definitely let me know what your thoughts are on this album. But if you haven't listened to this album and you are definitely a thrash metal fan, I would say this is definitely not a bad album. Though again, I do at least recommend checking out their classic albums such as Force Recon and Lunacy. But this album wouldn't do you any problems anyways. I think you'll definitely do yourself pretty good as well just by getting this album as well. So with that, I hope all enjoyed. This is Every Thrash and Sam out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.